So this lesson we're going to be looking at the math and rounding, so we can round it to the nearest number, so either up or down. Ceiling will round it up, floor will round it down. How we can generate a random number, so this is going to be a number from 1 to 10, including 1 and including 10. And also how we can create a function that's going to generate a random number where we can pass in a minimum value and a maximum value and then return back a resulting value. The math object in JavaScript allows us to perform mathematical tasks with code. So let's first set up some numbers and assign some values to these numbers. So these are going to have a decimal point, and I want to output the variations of these numbers, and we're going to wrap it with a math round first. And what math round will do is it's going to round the value to the nearest integer. So if we round the value of num1 to the nearest integer, it's going to return back as 6. So if this was 5.4, then the result would be 5. So it rounds up or down depending on what the nearest integer will be. There's also a math ceiling. And what math ceiling will do is it's going to round to the nearest, so it rounds up to the nearest integer. So it doesn't matter even if this was a 5.1, it would still round it up to 6 because it's doing a math ceiling. And the last one that we're going to look at is going to be the math floor, and this provides us a way to round down. So it rounds down to the nearest integer. So in this case, the result will be 5. So even if this was 5.999, it's going to round down and return the result back as 5. And another one that we used in the last lesson was the math random. So this provides us a random value from starting with 0 and not including 1. So it's inclusive of 0 and not inclusive of 1. And this returns back a 0 decimal value. So when we do a math random, we'll log out the console of num2, and that returns back a different value every time we refresh it. So if we were to run through this multiple times and then loop through while I is less than 10, increment I by 1, and then we'll open and we'll close the brackets and just indent this. So that should give us 10 different values that are being output into the console. Now, in order to get the value, we would typically either round floor to round it down or round it up. So we multiply it by the number that we want to return it to. So in this case, if we want to use the math random, we would multiply it by, so if we wanted a value from 0 to 9, we would multiply it by 10. And that means that we're not including the ones. So that means that this value will never equate to 1. So this number will always be a value of 0 to 9. And that's where we would be using the rounding. So we see that we've got an 8 point, an 8.2, 5.8, 5, 6. So we want to drop the rest of the remainder. And we can do that where we can implore using the math floor. So we're wrapping the result of the math random within the math floor. And that's going to result within the one integer value. And now these values are going to be a value from 0 being the lowest to 9 being the highest. If we want to get a value from 0 to 10, that's going to be multiplying it by 11. So there's going to be 11 possible response values that we could potentially be getting. If we want to get a value from 1 to 10, so we only want to return back 10 possibilities, so 1 all the way up to 10. And from here, what we can do is we can add 1 to it. So instead of going from 0 to 9, which this one will do, if we add 1 to it, we're going to get a result starting at 1 and resulting in 10. So these are just the random numbers, once again, that we're outputting there. Let's create a function that can return back a random value. So we can set a minimum and as well as a maximum. So if we want to set a random number and including both those values, let's create that function for it. So this is going to return back a random value. And we're going to require the two parameters, so it's minimum and maximum. And within the function return, using the math floor, so we want to get a random number, and then math random to generate the random number. And then what we want to do is we want to multiply it by the number. So this is going to be the difference between the maximum and minimum. And if we want to include the maximum as well, then we're just going to be adding 1 to it. So let's figure out what that number is. So max minus min, but we need to add 1 to it. And then afterwards, we're going to be adding min. So what that will do is that's actually going to include the minimum. So resulting in a value, since we added the 1, we're including the minimum. So these results here are going to be representing a number from the minimum to the maximum. So let's just update that within the loop here, and outputting a value of a minimum of 1 and a maximum of 5. We'll run through the results, and we see that we do get a minimum of 1 and a maximum of 5. So all of those values have been returned. So that's how you can create a function in order to generate a random number. And this is going to be including the minimum and maximum values.